Ambassador Jack Reynolds smiled his most diplomatic smile as he circulated through the grand reception hall of the Galactic Confederation embassy. The champagne was flowing, the hors d'oeuvres were exotic but edible, always a concern at these multi-species gatherings, and no interstellar incidents had occurred yet. By diplomatic standards, it was practically a miracle. "Quite the turnout tonight," remarked his human colleague, Deputy Ambassador Tina Mercer, sidling up beside him with 2 glasses of what appeared to be blue champagne. She handed him one. Even the Drakari delegation showed up, and they usually avoid these functions like they're contagious. Jack accepted the drink and surveyed the room. She was right. Representatives from nearly every major species in the Confederation were present, including several apex predator races who typically disdained prey gatherings, as they called them. The towering Drakari with their serrated mandibles and chitinous exoskeletons, the sleek Vexdori with their retractable claws, and even a couple of the notoriously reclusive Threnkau, whose natural hunting camouflage made them appear slightly translucent under certain lights. "Must be the free booze," Jack quipped, taking a sip of his drink and immediately regretting it. Blue apparently meant tastes like gasoline mixed with blueberries. "Or they're finally warming up to humanity's charm," Tina said with a laugh. "Yeah, right after they warm up to the idea of becoming vegetarians." A server droid glided past, and Jack gratefully deposited his drink on its tray. "Speaking of warming up," Tina continued, "did you hear about the incident in the Arcturus sector? Apparently some pirates tried to raid a human transport vessel." "Poor life choice," Jack commented. "Let me guess, Marines on board." The effect was immediate and bewildering. A nearby Drakari ambassador dropped his drink, shattering the crystal flute on the marble floor. 2 Vexdori representatives who had been mid-conversation froze completely, their pupils dilating to almost comical proportions. Most shocking of all, a 7-foot-tall Threnkau diplomat dove under a serving table with surprising agility, causing the elaborate ice sculpture to wobble dangerously. The entire reception area had gone eerily quiet, with every predator species representative either frozen in place or actively seeking cover. The prey species looked around in confusion, while the human delegates exchanged baffled glances. "What the hell just happened?" Jack whispered to Tina, who looked equally perplexed. Before she could respond, the Drakari ambassador had composed himself and was rapidly backing away, the mandibles clicking in what Jack recognized as their equivalent of nervous laughter. "Apologies, Ambassador Reynolds," the massive insectoid said, voice modulator translating his clicks into standard English. "I just remembered a prior engagement. Most urgent. Please excuse my hasty departure." Within 30 seconds, every predator species representative had made similar excuses and exited, leaving the reception considerably emptier and significantly more confused. Jack turned to Tina with raised eyebrows. "Did I say something offensive in their languages? Some kind of translator malfunction?" "I don't think so," she replied slowly. "The only thing you said was..." "Marines," Jack finished, the word barely above a whisper. Remarkably, a passing Varuxian diplomat heard him and dropped an entire plate of appetizers before scurrying away. "Okay," Jack said, watching the retreating form of the normally fearless Varuxian. "Now I'm really curious." Jack's office in the human diplomatic wing was comfortable by human standards, which meant it was quaintly primitive by Confederation norms. He preferred real wood furniture and actual paper books to the holographic displays and quantum-locked data crystals that were standard issue. As he settled behind his desk the next morning, his interspecies assistant, Krex, entered carrying what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a coffee mug. Krex was a Zenthari, a reptilian species known for their logical minds and perpetual state of exasperation, particularly when dealing with humans. His scales were a pleasant teal color that shifted slightly with his mood, currently a shade that Jack recognized as professionally concerned. "Good morning, Ambassador," Krex said, placing the steaming mug on Jack's desk. "I've prepared your preferred morning stimulant." I still fail to understand why you ingest a mild toxin to improve cognitive function, but your species' biochemistry remains an ongoing mystery to me. Thanks, Krex, Jack replied, taking a grateful sip. And it's called coffee. Been keeping humans functional for about 1,000 years now. Fascinating, Krex replied in a tone that suggested it was anything but. I've organized your schedule for today. The Reptilian Trade Delegation requests a meeting at 1,400 hours, and the Confederation Security Council has postponed their session until next week due to an unexpected situation. Let me guess, Jack said, leaning back in his chair. Every predator species representative suddenly had urgent business elsewhere. Krex's scales shifted to a mottled pattern that Jack recognized as surprise. Indeed. How did you? Because the same thing happened at last night's reception when I said the word Marines. Jack watched carefully and saw Krex's inner eyelid flicker a subtle tell. Interesting observation, Ambassador, Krex said, a bit too casually. Perhaps a cultural misunderstanding. Cut the diplomatic double talk, Krex. You know something. The Xanthari's scales rippled with reluctance. It is not something generally discussed with humans. I'm not asking as a human. I'm asking as the official representative of Earth to the Confederation. If I've stumbled onto some kind of interspecies faux pas, I need to know about it. Krex's tail twitched, another sign of discomfort. Very well. But perhaps we should consult someone with more direct experience. The embassy's security chief might provide better context. An hour later, Jack found himself in the basement levels of the embassy, in the surprisingly cozy office of Commander Vexlar, the facility's head of security. As a phalanax, Vexlar resembled an oversized humanoid cat, complete with retractable claws and slitted pupils. Currently, those pupils were narrowed to thin lines as she regarded Jack with obvious discomfort. So Jack began, settling into a chair that was clearly designed for someone with a tail. I understand there's something about Marines that makes apex predator species nervous. Vexlar's whiskers twitched. Nervous is an understatement, Ambassador. The term triggers what you might call an instinctive fear response. But why? We have several branches of military service, but nobody dives under tables when I mention the Air Force or Navy. The security chief's ears flattened against her head. It has to do with an incident that occurred during humanity's early days in the Confederation, before your time. Before my time, even. The Proxima Centauri Incident, Krex interjected, scales shifting to a scholarly blue. Approximately 78 Earth years ago, shortly after humans joined the galactic community. Vexlar nodded, whiskers drooping. My grandmother was there. She rarely spoke of it, but when she did, the phalanax shuddered visibly. Let's just say there's a reason predator species have a certain respect for your Marines. Respect seems a bit mild for diving under furniture, Jack observed. Perhaps, Vexlar conceded, but there's also the matter of how the stories have grown over time. You know how these things can be embellished. Jack leaned forward. So what actually happened? The security chief and Krex exchanged glances. The official records are classified, Krex said finally. Even I don't have access, and I have level 7 clearance. But Vexlar added, sudden inspiration lighting her feline features, there is someone on station who might be able to help. A human, actually. Retired from your Marine Corps decades ago, but she was there. One of the few survivors. Survivors? Jack echoed, his curiosity now thoroughly piqued. Of what exactly? Must. Vexlar stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Find Sergeant Major Maxine Torres, maintenance level, Section D. She keeps the environmental systems running. The phalanax's whiskers twitched with nervous energy. An ambassador? Perhaps don't mention where you got her name. She's not particularly fond of my species. The maintenance levels of the embassy were a stark contrast to the polished diplomatic areas above. Here, the gleaming surfaces gave way to industrial functionality, exposed pipes, bundled cables, and the constant hum of machinery. Jack and Krex made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, following directions from increasingly nervous maintenance workers. "I don't understand why everyone gets so twitchy when we mention Torres," Jack grumbled after yet another technician had given them directions and then scurried away. "Perhaps because she has a reputation for being somewhat difficult," Krex suggested diplomatically. They turned a corner and entered a large control room filled with monitoring equipment. In the center stood a compact woman in her 90s, her white hair cut in a severe style that hadn't been fashionable for at least 50 years. Despite her advanced age, she moved with precision as she calibrated a complex-looking device, her weathered hand steady. "Sergeant Major Torres?" Jack ventured. The woman didn't look up from her work. "Retired. And you're standing on a pressure-sensitive maintenance panel, Ambassador. Step 6 inches to your left unless you want to trigger the emergency decontamination protocols." Jack hastily moved. "Better," Torres said, finally turning to face them. Her face was a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and evaluating. "Now, what brings Earth's top diplomats slumming it in the maintenance levels? Lost your way to the caviar bar?" "Actually, I was hoping you could help me understand something," Jack replied, deciding direct honesty was probably the best approach. Specifically, why predator species across the Confederation seem to have a panic attack whenever someone mentions Marines. The change in Torres was immediate. Her posture straightened, a ghost of military bearing resurfacing as a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "So they still remember, do they?" There was unmistakable satisfaction in her voice. "Remember what exactly?" Jack pressed. "The records are classified, and all I can get are vague references to the Proxima Centauri Incident." Torres chuckled, a sound like gravel being crushed. "Classified." "Right, more like buried because it was embarrassing for the big bad predators of the galaxy." She gestured toward a small office off the main control room. "Come on then, if you want the real story. Not that sanitized diplomatic crap they feed you upstairs." The office was cluttered but meticulously organized, with ancient military memorabilia occupying one wall, including, Jack noted with surprise, an actual projectile weapon in a display case. Torres followed his gaze. "M4 carbine. Standard issue back when I was young and pretty." She settled into a worn chair behind a utilitarian desk. "So you want to know about Proxima Centauri? Why? Planning to add it to your cocktail party small talk?" "More like trying to avoid causing an interstellar incident," Jack replied. "I mentioned Marines casually yesterday, and half the reception dove for cover." Torres barked out a laugh. "Good. Means they haven't forgotten." She leaned back, eyes distant with memory. It was 2087, just 3 years after Earth joined the Confederation. We were still the new kids, barely had our FTL technology working. Most species saw us as primitive curiosities, especially the predator races. The Drakari, Vexdori, and Threnkal, Krex supplied helpfully. Among others, Torres nodded. Back then they were even more aggressive. Hadn't been fully civilized by Confederation membership yet. They saw us as easy targets, soft prey. Her smile turned wolfish. They were wrong. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old-fashioned data chip, inserting it into her terminal. A holographic display flickered to life, showing official military reports and grainy footage. "The Confederation granted us a research outpost in the Proxima Centauri system," Torres continued. "Minimal defenses, because it was supposed to be a peaceful scientific mission. My Unit 43 Marines was sent as basic security, standard protocol." The display showed images of a modest outpost on a rocky moon. What the bureaucrats didn't tell us was that Proxima Centauri was in disputed territory. The Drakari hegemony claimed it as their ancestral hunting grounds or some such nonsense. Torres's face hardened. They decided to send a message. A battle fleet carrying over 600 elite Drakari warriors. 600 against 43? Jack couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. 42, Torres corrected. Lieutenant Rodriguez was on leave. Even worse odds. For them, Torres said with a predatory smile of her own. The Drakari thought it would be easy, Torres continued, enlarging a grainy image of massive insectoid warriors in some kind of battle armor. They'd swoop in, overwhelm the pathetic human defenses, slaughter everyone, and be home in time for whatever passes as dinner in their culture. Problem was, they'd only studied our conventional military forces. They'd never encountered Marines before. She pulled up another image, this one showing the research outpost from orbit. They disabled our communications first, standard procedure. Cut us off from any reinforcements. Then they settled into orbit and started landing troops. Torres chuckled darkly. First mistake. What should they have done? Jack asked, fascinated despite himself. Orbital bombardment, Torres replied matter-of-factly. Would have been much safer for them. But no, they wanted the glory of hand-to-hand combat against the new species. Wanted to prove their superiority. Krex's scales had shifted to a deep blue of scholarly interest. A common psychological trait among apex predator species. They value personal combat prowess over tactical efficiency. Exactly, Torres nodded. Meanwhile, we had two advantages they didn't account for. First, our commanding officer, Captain Rivera, was paranoid as hell. Had us drilling for alien invasion scenarios since day one, even though everyone thought she was crazy. She pulled up the image of a stern-faced woman. Second advantage was that we're Marines. We improvise, adapt, and overcome. It's what we do. Jack leaned forward. So what happened when they landed? Well, first off, they landed about 10 clicks from the outpost, Torres explained, bringing up a topographical map. Figured they'd approach on foot, make a big show of it. What they didn't know was that we'd mapped that entire region and set up motion sensors everywhere. You knew they were coming? From the moment their first shuttle touched down, Torres's eyes gleamed with remembered satisfaction. Captain Rivera implemented Defensive Plan Charlie, which basically meant let's get creative. The display shifted to show schematic diagrams of what looked like improvised traps and weapon systems. We had limited conventional weapons, but we had a research outpost full of scientific equipment and Marines with time on their hands to think up nasty surprises. Do you know what happens when you repurpose atmospheric testing equipment to create localized high-pressure zones? Jack shook his head. Drakari exoskeletons implode, quite messily. Torres didn't bother hiding her satisfaction. Their first wave walked right into what amounted to giant bug zappers. Lost 30 warriors before they even saw a human. That's resourceful, Jack said carefully. That was just the beginning. We had modified mining lasers set up as anti-personnel weapons. We reprogrammed maintenance drones to swarm and blind their units. But my personal favorite was the chemical weapon. Krex looked alarmed. Chemical weapons violate Confederation protocols. Torres waved a dismissive hand. Not an actual chemical weapon. Just regular old capsaicin. Pepper spray? Jack asked. Essentially. Turns out Drakari breathing apparatus are incredibly sensitive to capsaicin. Their entire third wave was incapacitated because we'd aerosolized a bunch of hot sauce from the mess hall. The more Torres talked, the more Jack understood why the story might have been classified. It wasn't just a battle, it was a humiliation. By the time they actually reached the main compound, they'd lost over 100 warriors to traps and ambushes. The rest were furious, disorganized, and convinced we had some kind of supernatural powers. That's when Captain Rivera decided to really mess with their heads. Torres brought up an audio file. We broadcast this on all frequencies, cranked up to maximum volume. She hit play, and the room filled with the unmistakable sounds of the Marine Corps hymn, followed by blood-curdling battle cries and what sounded like ritual chanting. Psychological warfare, Jack realized. The Drakari had never encountered anything like it. Their species communicates primarily through mandible clicks and pheromones. Our screaming and chanting completely disrupted their ability to coordinate. Tora's expression grew more serious. The actual fighting was still brutal. We lost good people. But for every Marine that fell, we took down dozens of them. Not because we were stronger or faster, they had us beat there by miles, but because we were meaner, more creative, and absolutely refused to die according to their plans. The holographic display showed footage of the final assault, grainy and chaotic, but clear enough to see human Marines employing tactics that made no sense by conventional warfare standards. They separated into seemingly vulnerable small units to draw the Drakari in, only to collapse tunnels or trigger explosive traps. They appeared to retreat in panic, only to lead pursuers into crossfires. After 18 hours of fighting, their commander called for evacuation, Torres said. Out of over 600 elite warriors, fewer than 200 made it back to their ships. We lost 17 Marines. And that's why they fear the word, Jack asked. Not quite, Torres replied. That's why they respect it. The fear came afterwards, when the story spread. See, Captain Rivera knew we needed to make sure this never happened again. So when the Confederation investigators arrived, she had us put on a show. What kind of show? Torres's smile was pure predator. We collected the mandibles from the Drakari dead, made a display of them. When the officials arrived, we were sitting around, cleaning our weapons, wearing necklaces of Drakari mandibles, singing the Marine Corps hymn. Jack winced. That's barbaric? Absolutely effective? Completely. Torres leaned forward. Within a week, every predator species in the Confederation had heard about the savage humans who not only defeated an elite Drakari force but took trophies and sang about it. And as the story spread, Krex began. It grew, Torres finished. Soon it wasn't just 42 Marines against 600 Drakari. It was 20 Marines, then 10. The traps became more elaborate in the retelling, the victories more decisive. Within a year, there were stories about single Marines taking down entire squads with their bare hands. She shut down the holographic display. The Drakari never acknowledged their defeat officially. The Confederation classified the incident to avoid diplomatic complications. But the stories, those spread like wildfire among the predator species. And 78 years later, Jack said, understanding dawning, they still dive under tables when someone mentions Marines. Exactly. Torres seemed enormously pleased by this legacy. So, Ambassador, now you know. Use that knowledge wisely. Jack and Krex made their way back to the diplomatic levels in thoughtful silence. The ambassador's mind was racing with implications and possibilities. This explains so much, he finally said as they entered his office. The unusual deference from predator species at certain negotiations. The way they always back down when human military advisors are present. Indeed, Krex agreed, his scales shifting to a contemplative purple. Although I must emphasize that Sergeant Major Torres's account likely contains significant embellishments. Maybe so, Jack conceded, but the effect is real enough. I've never seen a Threnkal move that fast outside of a hunting scenario. He settled behind his desk and activated his terminal. Let's see if we can access any official records about this incident, even if they're redacted. After an hour of searching through diplomatic archives with Krex's assistance, they had pieced together enough corroborating evidence to confirm the broad strokes of Torres's story. The Proxima Centauri Incident had indeed been a turning point in humanity's relationship with the predator species of the Confederation. Ambassador, Krex said suddenly, his scales shifting to an alarmed orange. I've just received a priority alert from Confederation intelligence. Jack looked up from his reading. What is it? There appears to be unusual movement in the Deneb sector. A previously unknown predator species has emerged from unexplored space. They've already raided 3 outposts and are not responding to Confederation hails. Jack frowned. New players who don't know the rules. That's never good. Nay. There's more, Krex continued, his tail twitching with concern. Intelligence suggests their next target might be this diplomatic station. Their fleet trajectory and intercepted communications indicate they're specifically interested in assessing humanity's defenses. They want to test us, Jack realized. They haven't heard the stories. Precisely. And unfortunately, the nearest Confederation defensive fleet is 3 days away at maximum FTL. Jack leaned back, mind racing. What about our own ships? Any human vessels nearby? Krex consulted his datapad. The USS Lexington is scheduled to arrive tomorrow for a routine diplomatic visit. Standard complement of crew and, oh. What? A unit of Marines is on board. Ceremonial duties for the upcoming Federation Day celebrations. A slow smile spread across Jack's face. Perfect. Get me a secure channel to the Lexington's captain immediately. And then I need to speak with Sergeant Major Torres again. By evening, Jack had convened an emergency meeting in the embassy's secure conference room. Present were Krex, Commander Vexlar, Sergeant Major Torres, and via holographic link, Captain Elena Ramirez of the USS Lexington. Let me make sure I understand the plan, Captain Ramirez said, her holographic image flickering slightly. You want to use the reputation of the Marine Corps as psychological warfare against an unknown hostile species? Essentially, yes, Jack confirmed. According to our intelligence, this new species, the Karlak, are apex predators who operate on similar psychological principles to the Drakari and other predator species we're familiar with. They respect strength and fear what they don't understand. And right now they don't understand humans, Torres added with a predatory grin. I like it. Vexlar looked less convinced, her whiskers twitching nervously. This is highly unorthodox, Ambassador. If it fails, we're no worse off than we are now, Jack pointed out. The Lexington is a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. It's not equipped to repel a serious attack from multiple Karlak vessels, and Confederation reinforcements won't arrive in time. The key, Krex interjected, scales shifting to a strategic green, is making them believe the legends without actually testing them. We need to convince them that attacking a facility containing human Marines would be suicidal. And how exactly do we do that? Captain Ramirez asked. Jack turned to Torres. That's where our resident Marine comes in. Sergeant Major, how would you feel about coming out of retirement for one last mission? Torres straightened, years seeming to fall away from her bearing. Just tell me what you need, Ambassador. I need you to help us create the most terrifying impression of Marines possible, Jack replied. Something that will make the Karlak reconsider their entire life choices. Torres's smile would have made a shark proud. Now that, sir, is something I can definitely help with. 24 hours later, Jack stood in the station's main communications center, watching as 5 Karlak vessels took up positions around the diplomatic station. The alien ships resembled predatory sea creatures, all sharp angles and menacing protrusions. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. Jack nodded. On screen, please. The main display flickered to life, revealing a Karlak commander. The species resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a velociraptor, with iridescent scales and multiple compound eyes. When it spoke, the translation came through with a clicking undertone. Attention, human diplomatic facility. I am War Leader K. Zoth of the Karlak Dominion. Your station is now under our control. Surrender immediately, and prepare to be boarded for evaluation of human combat capabilities. Jack stepped forward, projecting calm authority. "This is Ambassador Jack Reynolds of Earth. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, War Leader. This station is not surrendering." The alien's head tilted in what appeared to be amusement. "You have no defenses, Ambassador. One diplomatic vessel against 5 war cruisers. Your situation is, what is your human expression?" "Ah yes, hopeless." "Actually," Jack replied smoothly, "I think you'll find we have something far more dangerous than conventional defenses." He nodded to Krex, who activated a pre-arranged signal. The communication suddenly split to include a feed from the USS Lexington's hangar bay. There stood Sergeant Major Torres in full ceremonial Marine dress uniform, surrounded by 20 Marines similarly attired. Behind them, displayed prominently, was a collection of what appeared to be trophy mandibles, claws, and other appendages from various predator species. Torres stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of decades of command. "War Leader K. Zoth, I am Sergeant Major Maxine Torres, United States Marine Corps. I understand you're interested in evaluating human combat capabilities." The Karlak leader's compound eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Torres continued, her voice casual but laced with menace. "You should know that the last time a predator species tried to test Marines, we used their exoskeletons as percussion instruments while singing our battle hymns." She gestured to the trophies behind her. "As you can see, we keep souvenirs." On cue, the Marines behind her began a low, harmonized rendition of the Marine Corps hymn. The effect was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. "Now," Torres continued over the singing, "I understand you have 5 vessels. We have 23 Marines on board ready for close-quarters combat. The math doesn't favor you, War Leader." The Karlak commander remained silent for several long moments, compound eyes darting between Torres and the singing Marines. "This station is under Marine protection," Jack added calmly. "We would prefer peaceful contact, but the choice is yours." Another moment of silence passed before the Karlak leader's mandibles clicked rapidly. What their intelligence suggested was their version of clearing a throat. "It appears we have indeed misunderstood the situation," War Leader K. Zoth said finally. "The Karlak Dominion has no interest in conflict with your Marines." The way he pronounced the word suggested both fear and respect. "We will withdraw and pursue diplomatic channels through proper Confederation protocols." Jack nodded graciously. "A wise decision, War Leader. We look forward to peaceful discussions in the future." When the communication ended and the Karlak vessels began moving away from the station, the control room erupted in relieved cheers. Jack turned to find Krex staring at him, scales a mixture of amazement and disbelief. "That actually worked," the Zenthari said, sounding stunned. "Of course it worked," Torres replied, entering the control room with a satisfied expression. "The legend of the Marines grows with each telling. Now we've added the Karlak to the list of species who'll dive under tables at diplomatic functions." Jack laughed, feeling the tension of the past day finally releasing. "I suppose I should be more careful about mentioning Marines in mixed company from now on." Or, Torres suggested with a mischievous gleam in her eye, you could use it strategically. Nothing ends a diplomatic stalemate faster than casually mentioning that Marines might get involved. 3 months later, at another diplomatic reception, Jack watched with barely concealed amusement as representatives from the newly admitted Karlak Dominion carefully avoided the human section of the gathering. Ambassador K. Zoth, formerly War Leader, flinched visibly when a waiter dropped a tray nearby. "I see our new friends are settling in well," Tina commented, joining Jack by the refreshment table. "As well as can be expected," Jack replied. "They submitted their petition to join the Confederation in record time after our little encounter. Apparently, they decided being allies with humans was safer than the alternative." "And the legend grows," Tina said with a smile. "Did you hear the latest version spreading among the junior diplomatic staff?" Supposedly, a single Marine once defeated an entire Drakari battlecruiser armed with nothing but a combat knife and harsh language. Jack chuckled. Sergeant Major Torres would approve. Speaking of which, Tina nodded toward the entrance. Your invitation was accepted. Jack turned to see Torres entering the reception hall, resplendent in her full-dress uniform. Despite her age, she carried herself with unmistakable Marine bearing. Every predator species representative in the room suddenly found fascinating reasons to examine their drinks or study the architectural features of the ceiling. Ambassador, Torres greeted him with a crisp nod. Quite the gathering you've arranged. Thank you for coming, Sergeant Major, Jack replied. I thought having a genuine Marine at the reception might enhance the diplomatic atmosphere. Torres's eyes twinkled with understanding. Happy to serve, sir. Should I mention that the rest of my unit is joining us later, or would that cause a mass evacuation? Jack pretended to consider it. Maybe save that for the trade negotiations tomorrow. I hear the Drakari are driving a particularly hard bargain on dilithium tariffs. Torres smiled, the same predatory smile that had launched a galactic legend. Consider it done, Ambassador. We Marines are always happy to serve as diplomacy's ultimate argument. And across the room, Ambassador K. Zoth of the Karlak Dominion, hearing only the word Marines, promptly spilled his drink down the front of his ceremonial robes. The legend would continue to grow and humanity's reputation along with it. Not bad for a species that had once been dismissed as mere prey.